Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast and website about reimagining your life. Thanks for joining me today to talk about, well, the positive aspects of aging. So let's get started. If you like what you hear today, please leave a like, subscribe, tell your friends, send me a message. Thanks for joining me tonight to talk about a few age related topics. There are a number of interesting stories kind of vying for your attention the past couple weeks, so I decided to mention three of them kind of briefly. The common thread is that they all represent a shift in the way people and or society are thinking about aging and retirement and what retirement even means. We talk here, we talk quite a bit about retirement and the whole aspect of it. But as I'm sure you're well aware, the general consensus of aging in the older population really hasn't changed or certainly not improved much over the past few years. And it's actually probably gotten a little worse in some ways. But I realize these stories all show a very different perspective that's starting to get some attention in the mainstream medical press and in the financial world. And it's just a nicer way to starting to evolve out of things, which is pretty nice for a change. Um, and so I've spoken about some of them before, but you'll recognize some of the things, but it's a different view of the topics than we've talked about in the past. The first was an article on apparently there's a growing disagreement in the scientific and medical communities over whether aging is a disease. And as the article points out, I certainly agree, there's many risks of thinking about aging that way because starting with the word disease, it's a word that has inherently bad connotations and is certainly not something associated with any benefits. And aging really does have many benefits. But even beyond the negative connotations, if something is a disease, then there must be or ought to be a cure, which runs the risk of then creating this anti-aging industry that help cure the disease of aging. But the first big problem with that whole approach is that what it is to age, what kind of age are you referring to? As we age, different aspects of ourselves age at far different rates. So what are you going to cure? And is it really a cure or a preventative? Plus, as we covered before in reference to Dr. Becca Levy, we've spoken about her, and she has very uplifting viewpoint on aging. Um, there are already many simple preventative ways to stave off the effects of aging, and most include things like physical and mental activity, socializing, eating a basically balanced and healthy diet. These aren't magical things. Plus, as is often spoken about, the health costs due to the effects of ageism, um, they're just tremendous. One study that Dr. Levy worked on estimated the total healthcare costs from ageism to be about $63 billion, that's billion with a B, every year. So big numbers. These costs are both in the psychological effects of ageism and also things like the incorrect decisions made in healthcare and elsewhere because of age-related assumptions. But it's encouraging to see that this sort of discussion is even beginning to happen, especially in the scientific community, which can be a little set in their ways. But it's beginning to happen with advocates starting to come out and point out the harm being done by the current assumptions and the opportunities that are readily available. So I was pretty happy with that article. And there's more detail in it. We may come back and revisit that at some point, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what's coming up. But related to that, the next article is also a health article, and it's on the newly approved AirPods hearing aids. And the short version is, I'll give you the really short version. They work okay for some people. They're pretty ineffective for many others. They don't stay in your ears nearly as well as hearing aids do, and you'll have to buy a couple pairs if you want to wear them all the time because the battery life is pretty short. So I just saved you a bunch of money. You don't have to go buy one or two pairs. But seriously, they're probably worth trying out for a lot of people. But honestly, dedicated hearing aids, and I have no association with hearing aids, hearing aid manufacturers, hearing aid providers, prescribers, or anything else. But dedicated hearing aids do have many application-specific features that they've honed over. Well, I can remember one of my uncles wearing hearing aids back in the 60s. So they've been working on it for a while. And they have features like relatively long run times, loop pickups for assisted hearing. There's a little symbol. I should have put the symbol in. I didn't think to do it. It looks like an ear, and it tells you that there's a loop in the floor, and basically you turn your hearing aid on to listen for it. It's like you see in museums, some ballparks and theaters and things like that. And so you hear the sound, instead of waiting for the sound to come to your hearing aid with all the echoes and everything else and then being amplified, it picks the sound up right from the sound system and puts it right directly into your hearing aid with no distortion. So it's a huge step forward for people who really depend upon their hearing aids. But as much fun as that is, there's another forthcoming Bluetooth standard. It's actually out right now, and I think there's 3 hearing aid manufacturers supporting it. I could be wrong. That might be slightly dated information, but called Auracast. Auracast. I should have put up something about that. So let me do that real quick here if I can. It's Bluetooth Auracast, and there we have it. And there it is, Bluetooth Auracast. And think of it as kind of radio over Bluetooth. And so on a radio, you don't have to pair your radio with the radio station. You just turn to the frequency and hi, this is W whatever or K whatever, and you're listening to it. That's the concept behind Bluetooth Auracast. And the advantage over the hearing loops is it's much easier to install in a facility and it's much easier to install in the hearing aid. So there's some big technological advances coming right now that still give hearing aids a place in the whole spectrum. So, and actually, and the other neat thing about most hearing aids, I think probably at this point, is besides all the other tricks and features they know, you can still connect them to your phone. So it's not like using your AirPods gives you some amazing new ability. Your hearing aids usually connect to your phone as well. So don't get overly drawn in by the hype. The AirPod versions are useful for some people, but they aren't hearing aids. And so you should still speak to a hearing or medical professional and really take a look around, because some of the new hearing aids coming out have a lot of pretty nifty features. And by the way, again, I say I have no direct gain from any of this, but I do work on have been doing work for some time. I've spoken about in the past at my church on getting it so that it's hearing impaired can hear better at the church. And that's why I'm really kind of pretty excited about the Bluetooth Auracast stuff, because it's just a matter of putting up 1 or 2 transmitter boxes in the entire congregation and you're online, you're ready to go. So some neat things coming around the corner. So the next and final story is about an investor named Katerina Stropaniadi. I probably butchered that. I apologize, Katerina, who came to the U.S. from Greece as an entrepreneur. She was successful, and after a while, she wanted to start investing in other startups. So she came across a study from MIT, and I forgot the year, that showed that the age, it's a few years back, but that the age of most entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, unlike in the movies, was almost 42 years old. And then she learned that Morris Chang, who, if you're in semiconductors, you'd recognize his name, he founded the multi-billion-dollar TSMC chip manufacturing company in Taiwan. And he was in his 50s when he founded it. So Katerina now specializes in investing in people over 50 who have the experience and contacts that come with age. Also, older entrepreneurs tend to already have more to lose, whether it's an existing job, salary, or their tangibles. They already have a house, or all those things that come typically with getting older. So they tend to be more careful with money and more realistic in their approach. However, although slightly more conservative risk takers, they also have the experience to know where the good opportunities lie, because they're usually working in industries for a long time. So the returns expected to be about on par with younger entrepreneurs while lowering risk. The classic, the investor win-win situation. So again, capitalizing on much of what society calls weaknesses, she realizes the strengths in that, and other people call them weaknesses because they don't truly understand the potential. And actually, there was one more story. I was going to talk about on that aside, not to, but it's actually kind of a cute story, so I'll talk about it. And there's a couple, excuse me, look to my files down here. And there's a couple who retired together, and they've been writing about a monthly article in the Wall Street Journal in the personal section, and talking about what to expect in retirement. and the ups and downs and problems they've had and things, their thoughts and feelings that they didn't figure they would have that they did and that they figured they would have and they either do or don't. So it's an interesting article, and it is Karen Carter Yoder and Stephen Carter Yoder are the people. And so this one was kind of cute because I've talked about them before. They spend much of their time, have spent much of their time for their whole lives actually, riding a tandem bicycle and touring the U.S. and overseas, and just getting around a lot on their bicycle and camping out and such, and meeting a lot of people and just getting to places that are hard to do if you take a car from here to there. And so they've written about that, and they still bicycle even though they're retired now. But this last time they decided that they're going to take and rent a camper, and their whole thoughts were kind of like, oh, a camper, I can't believe we're in a camper, blah 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 blah. And so they went to San Francisco and pulled up in the camper to a beach, and they said, they were pretty late getting there, but because it was already getting dark, and they said normally if we were on our bikes we kind of like, oh, now we got to set up our tent in the dark, and then it's going to be pain, we still have to cook and everything else. And they said the camper, we just pulled up, turned it off, turned on the lights, turned on the stove, listened to some music, had dinner. He said it was actually kind of nice. You could kind of get used to this. And what I thought was cute about the article, that actually was Karen talking. Stephen said, no, I still want to go biking. I think that's a future argument for them. But the reality is sometimes as we age, Karen pointed it out nicely in the article, that she said, what we didn't realize, there's a lot of neat things about getting there when you bike, but when you get there, usually, you've biked all day, you just kind of want to have dinner, relax for a few minutes, and then rest because you've just been biking all day. So when you arrive in a camper, that's when your adventure really begins. The trip there was okay, but now you're at the place you wanted to go to. They had enough energy. They could go for a hike. They said they did a bunch of hiking that they normally wouldn't have done. They had more time to visit with people. They met more people. And so it was a very different experience. And I think that's part of what retirement offers, is the opportunity to see things differently and to experience the world differently. It isn't necessarily better or worse. It's just different and gives you a different perspective and a different insight into things. And so I think that's really the big takeaway from the article, not whether or not you should go in a camper versus biking per se, but just as we age, things change. And it doesn't mean things get worse, they just get different. And sometimes having to slow down a little bit isn't necessarily a bad thing. It gives you a different perspective. It makes you think about the choices that you've made more carefully and think about the ramifications of the choices you made more carefully. And sometimes that can lead to little changes, but sometimes it can lead to really big changes. Much like them going to places, some of which I think they may have been to before, and realizing, wow, we've never actually walked on this trail. Because they're so focused on a different aspect of it, they miss another piece of it completely. And that's really true throughout retirement. There's lots of ways to enjoy life. There's lots of ways to get through life. And as you retire, if you stay open-minded and try new things, you'll find that it isn't necessarily that you've lost out on doing something. You've just discovered a new way of doing it. So that's it for the evening. Kind of a quick tour of how attitudes are shifting and I think very much for the better, in good ways. And that there's just lots of opportunities are still around. Probably the most important takeaway is that you should never doubt yourself based upon what others say, and always have confidence in your own abilities. Capitalize on your strengths. Don't focus on your perceived weaknesses. And don't be afraid to try new things. There's always new things coming our way, and our natural tendency is to be cautious about them. And as we retire, get older, as we age and get ready to retire or do retire, a lot of times those things are perceived as negatives, and I think sometimes they're falsely perceived as negatives because the negative view is coming from looking at it from our younger age, and we may have missed the very obvious thing like they did in walking around they walked around all the hills around the beach, kind of like, wow, what a gorgeous view. And they never had been able to do that before. It was right there the whole time, but they're so focused on a different aspect. So it wasn't that driving there instead of biking there was something negative. It was just something different and opened up a different opportunity for them. And that's true for all of us throughout our retirement. So your homework tonight is think about which way is easier for you to consider aging, to consider it as a disease or a natural process, in which we have a lot of input through our own actions to control how that actually works. And I'll kind of bias it a little bit because I think you'll find the latter, that a process that we have some input into, is much more comfortable and also much more empowering. So again, thank you so very much. And that's it for the evening. Of course, we have our regular, our new updated page, ukr7.com, which is links to places where you can support the people of Ukraine. Hopefully that will end equitably before too long. But nonetheless, right now they definitely need help. And ukr7.com links to various places there that work in Ukraine, support the people in various ways. And of course, worldcentralkitchen.org, WCK.org. World Central Kitchen works in disaster areas around the world, typically with food and getting basic needs to people immediately after a disaster. Wonderful organization. They do a lot of great things. But as we talk about often, if you can donate to one of those places internationally, it's great. But if you want to work locally, that's great too. And if you're just not in a position where you can or want to donate to somebody right now, remember that there's a lot of ways you can always just make the world a little bit better in a very local way. Just see somebody, smile at them, say good morning. It doesn't have to be something over the top. It can be really little, just something to bring a little brightness into somebody else's day. It can change the world in major ways over time. So that's it. And as I always say, remember that one of the best ways to care for yourself is to care for others. And when you think outside yourself, it changes your perspective on the world tremendously. So if you can and you're able, ukr7.com, wck.org, local organizations, there's a ton of them. Just smile and make somebody's day better. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. If you found something interesting or useful, please pass it along and please subscribe and hit that like button. And if not, please drop me a comment as to what you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.